We got a little bit going on in Georgia this week with the Masters Golf Tournament. Big deal. I just want you to know we really appreciate our Georgians. If Stacey Abrams is elected governor of Georgia, I just want to be honest, that will be a Cold War between Florida and Georgia at that point. I mean, I can't have Castro to my south and Abrams to my north. That'd be a disaster. So I hope you guys take care of that and we end up in good shape. We're happy to be here in Gulf County. We have a lot of great dignitaries here with us today. Jimmy Petronas, the CFO from Panama City, good friend. We do want to thank everybody at Indian Pass Raw Bar here in Port St. Joe. Folks are in the area, check it out. They got good stuff. We want to thank Dane Eagle, our DEO secretary, for being here. Gulf County Sheriff Mike Harrison, thank you, sir. My U.S. Congressman Neil Dunn. Representative Jason Schoaf and Representative Michelle Salzman from North Florida. And we've got a lot of folks from communities throughout the Panhandle. Port St. Joe Mayor Rex Buzzard, City of Panama City, Greg Brudnicki, Century Mayor Ben Boutwell, Holmes County Chairman Earl Stafford, Ponce de Leon Mayor Shane Busby, City of Mariana Travis Ephraim, Town of Alford David Melvin, Wakulla County Chairwoman, where's Messersmith? I saw her earlier. Thank you. Chipley Mayor Tracy Andrews. Chairman Jim Peacock from Jackson County, Bay County Commissioner Griff Griffiths. So thank you guys for being here. We've got a lot of support to be able to announce here today. But you know, you look around what's going on with Florida, and you know, we've had huge. I mean, our employment is better than it was prior to COVID in terms of the workforce. You've got a lot of people that want to be here. We're going to probably end the fiscal year, if you look at how the revenues come in, you know, our budget for this year is about $101.5 billion for this fiscal year. New York's budget, for example, is $30 billion, and there are 3 million people less than us, and yet we have better roads, services, K-12 education, universities, all that stuff. But our budget surplus out of a $101.5 billion budget, you know, we're going to have between a $15 and $20 billion surplus by June 30th at the year end. And so that's better than we've ever had. That's better than we've ever had in the history of the state of Florida. And I think it's a testament to making sure that we're doing it right. We're a free state, which is very important. And a lot of people have gravitated here because of that. You know, we've had kids in school, whereas many locked them out for so long. We've had that. We've protected people's jobs, their freedoms. We've protected people's businesses, and people have had the opportunity to succeed. You know, the Panhandle has probably never done better than they have over the last 2 years. You see massive boom. You see a lot of tourism. I remember very early on in COVID, 2020 summer, my wife and I brought our kids. You know, we went to 30A, and I mean, I never saw so many Texas license plates, Louisiana. I mean, like, it was like the entire Southeast descended upon the Panhandle because that was the place you could live a normal life and you could be normal, and that was really, really important. And so, you know, I go to places everywhere from, you know, Okaloosa, Panama City, you name it. People say, you know, we had our best year ever in 2021. I mean, I hear that all the time. So we're excited about that. Concerned about what's going on in Washington and the inflation that you see. You know, when Biden, they've printed trillions and trillions of dollars. It's been very, very reckless. And what do you think is going to happen when you do that? You're going to have inflation. That's just textbook economics. And so they say inflation is 8%. Go to the grocery store. It's like 30 or 40%. Gas is up 40. I saw $4.29 on the way from Tallahassee in some of these gas stations for regular unleaded. And so you're going to continue to see that. They continue to want to print money, which is just going to exacerbate the inflation. And if you think about it, you could have good economy, you could have good jobs, you're getting increased income even. If you're 7% income increase, but inflation's 10%, you honestly are worse off at that point. And so that's what they're doing to us. They will not use more American energy to try to help people with gas prices. And I think that that's just cruel, because you have so many people that have to go to work, they have to commute, and this is just eating into their family budgets. And so, you know, our position is let's unleash Keystone and Anwar and all these places so we can get some relief at the pump. And so we're, you know, we are going to do a series. I mean, when I do the budget, we're going to have a series of tax relief in terms of the package. There'll be a gas tax holiday. There'll be back to school, all this other stuff, because we're trying to help with this. One of the things we actually are doing starting July 1st, and this matters because I've got a 2-year-old daughter, but we have a year-long tax holiday for diapers. And so you talk to those young parents, you know, when you have inflation, there may be some things you cut back on. You know, maybe you do less beef, maybe you do some of this. But I can tell you, when you got a little one like that, the diapers are kind of like, you got to buy them. I don't really know a way around it. And so I just think as someone, you know, my oldest is 5, she's long out of it. My son's 4, you know, he's out of it. But our 2-year-old, you know, we still got a little bit of runway here. So it was not my idea. This was not a self-serving tax cut, the legislature's idea. And then when I saw it, I immediately called my wife. And I'm like, you're not going to believe this. They're giving us a tax holiday for diaper purchases. And so that'll be real for a lot of people with young families. So we're doing what we can on that. And, you know, if we can do more, we are absolutely going to try to do more. But the underlying problem, you know, is this printing of the money and the borrowing and the bad energy policy. And, you know, I cringe when they say to people who are concerned about the high gas price that they should just go out and buy an electric vehicle. You know, first of all, these electric vehicles are 50, 60 grand, even for like the lower end ones. Second of all, it's not like you can even find, I mean, even if you're willing to pay that, it ain't like there's millions of these things out there. Very hard to get any kind of car right now with the supply chain. And so to tell people, you don't complain about the gas price, you just go buy an electric vehicle, you know, that's the equivalent of telling them to let them eat cake. And so we reject that, and we want to see energy independence in this country. The other thing that we're really concerned about is what's going on at the southern border. And since Biden became president, they've had 2 million people come across the border illegally. And I had people down there from Florida helping Texas. And I went down there and looked at this last summer. You know, it's people coming from all over the world across the border, because the word went out that if you just come across the border illegally, Biden, he'll put you on a plane and send you somewhere and do all this stuff. You know, it's interesting. We had tornado in southwest Florida rip through some mobile home parks. Very elderly people. They were on fixed incomes. We applied for the federal government to get individual assistance for the tornado victims. Biden stiffed these elderly residents. He gave them nothing. And he didn't give it because he doesn't like the governor. But I thought to myself, you won't give a cent for these elderly tornado victims in southwest Florida, but you'll pump billions of dollars into giving money to people coming to the country illegally? How does that make any sense? And so what they've done is you have record amount of sex trafficking, human trafficking, and drug trafficking as a result of these reckless border policies. We look now in the United States. What's the most significant narcotic coming across now? It's fentanyl. You know, they make it in China, but they bring it across the southern border. So now the #1 cause of death, and even the CDC admitted this, the #1 cause of death for people 18 to 45 in the United States of America is fentanyl overdose. That would not be the case if we had the border secured and didn't let the cartels eat our lunch every day. So what's going to end up happening now, as bad as it's been, it's fixing to get a lot worse. Why? Because he's actually repealing another one of Trump's programs, Title 42. The details don't matter as much for this discussion, but the bottom line is the few people who they were sending back immediately now are going to be able to come in illegally, and Biden is basically going to send them on their way throughout the interior of our country. So we had a record in terms of this 2 million. It could be 50 to 100% more as a result of this. And so, I think they need to hold Biden accountable for this. I think it's reckless that he's not following the law. But in Florida, I sent people to help, and I'm fine. But the problem was, our guys would interdict people. They're allowed to, they're quote allowed to come across the border because the feds don't do anything. So our guys would interdict them, but then they turn them over to Border Patrol, and then Biden would send them all across the country anyway. So it's like, what benefit is that even doing? Honestly, it's better for them to get captured because they get money and they get sent around. So it didn't really make a lot of sense. And so, but what I would do is, I think like Texas needs to lead. I would help. Other states would help to repel it from coming across the border in the first place with National Guard, with other types of folks to do that. And then if they do come illegally, just immediately return them across the border. If the federal government's not willing to do that, then the states can go and do it. So I'd be willing to help with that because I think that would make a meaningful difference. But to just turn them over to Border Patrol and then let Biden put them on a bus somewhere, I think is wrong. Now, we are getting money in the budget when I sign it soon. I do have money for if Biden is bringing and dumping people from the border who are here illegally into Florida, I have money to reroute to Delaware, and we're going to do that. But honestly, it shouldn't even come to that. It shouldn't come to that. He brought up people in about 4 or 5 months ago in a 2 a.m. flight in the middle of the night. They don't tell anybody this is coming. And they brought these people, and one of the people they brought, was illegally across the southern border, and he committed a murder in Northeast Florida, shortly thereafterwards. And so Biden's trying to import different problems to different communities across our country. And so, we need to stand up and fight back. And so that's what we'll do. That's what we'll do. But I would absolutely support fortifying the border if the states join together and do it. They say it's the federal government's role. You can't do anything. It probably is the federal government's role, but the question is that the federal government just simply defaults on their responsibility. Are the rest of us just defenseless? We can't defend, our own states and our own communities? I don't think that's what the Founding Fathers intended. And so, we need to get real about this because as bad as it's been, it is going to get a heck of a lot worse in the later part of May. And the word's already going out. People know, just come and you're going to be able to go in free of charge, basically. So that's a huge problem. The other huge problem that we see with a lot of these bad policies in cities like San Francisco and Chicago and New York is being really weak on crime and being really hostile to law enforcement. And they turn their backs on law enforcement. They defunded police or reduced the budgets dramatically in 2020 and 2021. Soros will fund these prosecutors. They get in places like San Francisco, and then what happens? They don't prosecute crimes. You can go and steal from stores, but if you steal less than $1,000, they just let you steal what you want. They don't even prosecute you for that. So the result has been crime has skyrocketed in a lot of these different jurisdictions, and the police have been treated horribly. They're not getting any support from a lot of these communities. So in Florida, we do the opposite. We're a law and order state. We're not going to allow criminals to overrun our rights and freedoms and put our communities in jeopardy. And so what we did in 2021 was, as other jurisdictions were cutting funding for law enforcement, we did two things. One, I signed a bill that prohibited any local government in Florida from defunding the police. Yeah. So that's done. We also did, as they were cutting funding in other parts of the country, we did $1,000 bonuses for every single firefighter, EMT, and sworn law enforcement officer in the entire state of Florida. And I'm happy to report in the budget that is going to be on my desk soon, I've already approved this provision. We're doing it again, 2 years in a row, $1,000 bonuses. But we also understood that we have an opportunity. You know, you go and talk to these, I don't know, like, where's the sheriff here? How many, do you have openings here? Four openings. Yeah, they got 4. I was down in Brevard County. You know, they've got like 20 openings. I was in Polk County with Sheriff Grady Judd. They've got 20, 30 openings. And so it used to be, it was very hard to get a job, you know, at a sheriff's department. Part of it now is I just think that, you know, people have been so negative to law enforcement, I think it's caused some people not to want to do it. So we're trying to address that in Florida by saying, I just signed a bill last week that says anybody in Florida who's young and is starting, if they go into law enforcement as a career, or anybody who's currently in law enforcement out of the state of Florida, in places like Seattle or Minneapolis or Chicago where they're getting treated horribly, if they transfer in and they're qualified to fill a position, you get a $5,000 signing bonus for signing up with us. I think you're going to see, I mean, first of all, you're already seeing, I mean, I run into people who left NYPD. I just ran into a guy who left Seattle to come to Florida. And I can tell you this, they're very, very happy when they get here and they like it better because they get support from the community. They get support from the governor and the legislature. And that's not true in all of those other jurisdictions. They're getting attacked just for doing their job. And so I think we have led the way on law and order, there's going to be more we're going to be doing over the next year or so, but we've led the way on law and order, and I think the result is going to be you're going to have people that are very qualified that are going to want to come serve, and that's going to make our communities safer, so I'm really looking forward to that happening. And then, you know, we've done a lot on the elections. We've banned ballot harvesting in the state of Florida, which is a bad practice. We don't have unsolicited mail ballots in Florida. And maybe the most important thing we did last year was we banned Zuckerbucks in the state of Florida. You know, if you look at what they did in 2020, they put like Zuckerberg and his groups, they put $420 million into quote, nonprofit groups. And the goal of the nonprofit was to, quote, help with the elections. But what they would do, they'd go to local election offices in key states, and they'd say, hey, here's $5 million for your election, but you need to have ballot harvesting and mail ballots, and you need to bring in and hire all of our people to be able to do. So what they basically did is they used this cash to commandeer the machinery of the actual elections, and then they ran the election for partisan purposes. That is wrong, and so we are not allowing that in the state of Florida. And then the final thing before we do our announcement that I'll say is, you know, Florida, we are leading the way in supporting the rights of parents and the well-being of our children. And we've done a number of pieces of legislation over the last year. Last year, we signed the Parents' Bill of Rights. You know, that was one of the things that we used to go to some of these school districts and unmask the kids. They were forcing the kids to wear masks for like 8 hours a day. So we were able to liberate, you know, hundreds of thousands of young people from forced masking, which is good. And there's other things in that bill. I also signed a bill guaranteeing every parent the right to curriculum transparency. So whatever curriculum is being used in the school, you as a parent have a right to inspect the curriculum, look at what the books are in the library. You know, there'll be library books for like 6th graders. It'll be really explicit, inappropriate stuff. And so parents need to know what's being on there. So you have the right to do it. Now, there's some people that don't believe parents have a right to know what's going on in the school. It's sad to say that that's the case, but that is the case. They think that really the kid is the property of the district, and that parents really just need to be butt out. We reject that in Florida. That is not the way it's going to go. And so then we did the Parents' Rights in Education, which said every parent in Florida has a right to send their kid to kindergarten without having things like transgenderism in the curriculum. I have a 5-year-old daughter. I just want her to be a 5-year-old, and we want to make sure that our young kids are able to focus on the core things, the learning to read, learning to write, math, science, all these different things that are so important. We want education, not indoctrination in the state of Florida, and that's what we are doing. And I don't really care what the media says about that. I don't care what very left-wing activists say about that. I do not care what big companies say about that. We are standing strong, and we will not back down from that. So it brings us here today. First of all, I'm really proud of, and I think a lot of these folks up here will admit, there's never been a governor that's been in the Panhandle communities more than me, and we're proud of that. But part of it is, we have a lot of opportunities to make a difference. Of course, initially, we had to help all the communities affected by Hurricane Michael. We did huge amounts of support. I was able to get additional support from President Trump. If Biden were president after Hurricane Michael, he wouldn't have given us anything. He would have totally stiffed us. So we really appreciate that. And then we've been able to say, what can we do from a strategic perspective to help with workforce development, help with infrastructure? I mean, for example, you look at what opportunities there are in the economy. If you have skills, particularly in traditional industries, if you can drive a truck, if you know how to weld, if you know how to do some of these things, you are making really, really good money right now. I just saw an article in the Wall Street Journal. Walmart is increasing the salaries for truck drivers to, I think, like $110,000 if you start out as a truck driver. I can tell you in Florida, we have put people signing up. They'll get a $15,000 signing bonus just to be a truck driver. So we've expanded the ability to get commercial driver's license. We have more slots at our state colleges. We did stuff in the Panhandle. We've done stuff in Northeast Florida. We're going to continue to do that. We're working on providing credentials and certification and apprenticeship programs so people can actually get skills that really matter. Look, I'm fine with people going to, universities. We have good ones in Florida. Now, we don't let them raise tuition, so it's actually affordable to go to a state university. But, some of these universities, they charge an arm and a leg, and they are providing, I think, mediocre education. They put a lot of that money into overhead and bureaucracy and accoutrements that really don't affect the underlying education. So you'll have kids that'll go in. They'll be told they have to get a piece of paper to be successful. They'll go $125,000 in debt. Degree will be in zombie studies or something like that. And then they end up in a job they could have had out of high school. Well, look, it's a free country, but we just want to let people know there's more than one way to be successful. A 4-year brick and ivy university may be one way, and we're so happy with what we've done in our universities, but it's not the only way, and there are many, many different ways to be able to be successful, particularly when you look at how in demand some of these skills are. And, even on like a local community level, if you know electrical or HVAC, like in Florida, a lot of the millennial and younger generation don't know how to fix things like the older generations did. Used to be like, people could fix a lot of this themselves. Well, now they need people to come in and fix it. So if you have those skills, not only do you get a job, you can go into business for yourself. You can be entrepreneurial. So we've worked really hard on workforce, and our goal is by 2030, we were bottom half of the states when I became governor. We're moving up very rapidly, but our goal is to be #1 in workforce education by the end of the decade. So we're going to continue to do that, but we also are going to continue to support infrastructure. You look at different things that we've been able to do. Sometimes it'll be maybe you have an industrial park. We'll expand some of the underlying services there so more businesses now can go in and work there. Maybe we'll put a road from one place to another so that commerce can go. There's a whole host of different things we've done on an infrastructure perspective, and we've done that through a number of different ways, including some of the things we're going to talk about today. But it's very, very important that we're doing that. So today is exciting because, and I'm going to be presenting these checks to these individual community leaders and elected officials, but we're awarding today $23 million for Panhandle communities. And it's from 3 different programs within the Department of Economic Opportunity. The Rural Infrastructure Fund, and we got more in the budget for that for next year. Community Development Block Grant, which helps local communities. And then the Hazard Mitigation Match Program, which helps with resiliency, particularly in storm-prone areas. And so today's awards are really significant, so I'm going to read them all, and then at the end we'll do some photos with everybody. So first, we're doing almost $700,000 for the town of Port St. Joe for downtown. So this is for the downtown revitalization project, and this will allow them to install a new water line in the downtown commercial district. We're doing almost $1 million for Panama City for 2 projects, including retrofitting 2 fire stations and wastewater drainage at Robinson Bayou. The town of Century and Escambia County for 2 community center, the renovations, $3.25 million for that. $1.1 million for Holmes County for renovations to a senior center and funding to improve drainage along a commercial corridor. Ponce de Leon, $1.14 million to expand a multi-purpose recreational facility and preliminary engineering to expand wastewater infrastructure. City of Cottondale, $2.5 million improvements to the downtown commercial area and 5 new lift stations. City of Marianna, $5.5 million for public safety, building codes, and improvements. Town of Alford, $250,000, community center improvements. City of Fort Walton Beach in Okaloosa County, we have medical and employment assistance. It looks like chicken scratch on my notes, but it's a check, so I don't want to give the wrong amount. Wakulla County, almost $250,000 for extension of natural gas services. City of Chipley in Washington County, 2 lift station generators in the city. Jackson County, $4 million for Jackson Hospital Air Purification Project, lift station generators, and engineering service for a campground at Blue Springs Recreational Area. And then Bay County, money for wastewater drainage and Cedar Grove. So these are all going to be very meaningful projects, particularly when you're talking about some of the more rural areas. That money goes a lot further than some of our more urban areas. And so we want to be able to make as big of impact as possible as we can. So we're happy to be able to be here. I tell people I usually don't come empty-handed. Usually when I come, we have something that we're able to do. Sometimes it's check. All right, so we've got, we're going to do these check presentations, and so we'll do that. We'll do the photos, and then we'll hear from some of our other folks, Jimmy Petronis and Dane Eagle. So which ones do we have? Do you want to just go?
Port St. Joe.
All right, Port St. Joe, where you at? We'll just do a photo right here.
Yep, there you go.
All right.